Hello and welcome back to Continuous Integration with Jenkins by Edureka. This is the final module of this video series in which we are going to take a look at Jenkins Pipeline. So the objective of this module would be to first of all understand what exactly pipeline as code is all about. Then we will talk about overview of pipeline plugin, and then we will see how do we automate Jenkins pipelines, or how do we write Jenkins as code or pipeline as code with the help of the pipeline plugin and the declarative and the Groovy scripts. So with that, let's get started. So first of all, let's try and understand what exactly we mean by pipeline as code. So all this while, what we have been doing is we have been going to Jenkins console and creating our jobs with the help of the GUI. Now that's pretty much a very decent way of doing things, but pipeline as code makes it much more efficient. And when you treat your Jenkins CI/CD pipeline as code, you get all the benefits of working with code. For example, the most important benefit you get is that you are able to version your pipeline. So you can actually have multiple versions of your pipeline. You can put them in a source code repository like Git. And if needed, you can go back to your previous version, previous working version, or previous most stable version of the code, if let's say something goes wrong with the new configuration. So pipeline as a code is a very convenient way to define and maintain Jenkins pipeline. You write the whole CI/CD pipeline as code, which is version controlled, as we have spoken. It uses DSL, which stands for domain specific language, to largely define tests that you want Jenkins instance to perform or Jenkins master to perform. And it can include Jenkins specific set of commands in the repository itself. So you have multiple ways of defining things, and you can go as granular as possible when it comes to pipeline as code. So what are the advantages? Why do you want to convert your pipeline into code? So first of all, it becomes programmable, and it's very easy to make any changes in your actual pipeline. All of the CI/CD pipeline configurations can be described using just a single file. Typically, the configuration you put is inside a Jenkins file. We call that Jenkins file, a single word with J in uppercase. It supports declarative pipeline syntax, which is an easy and elegant way of coding your pipe. So we do call it as coding, but actually it is as simple as learning or writing some English sentences. Of course, its version is controllable just like any other code. So if you want to relate this, the best analogy which I can provide you would be infrastructure as code. So when we do something, when we let's say go to VMware console and when you create a machine versus when you use a tool, let's say for example you use Terraform or CloudFormation or maybe Packer, Vagrant. So all these tools, they help you convert your infrastructure into. So all the benefits which you get there, all those benefits you get when you convert your Jenkins CI/CD pipeline into code. Now, creating a Jenkins pipeline is super easy. You just select the type of job as pipeline, and this is the screen which greets you. You have basically two different ways to create a pipeline. When you select this pipeline script, Jenkins provides you a place to put all these scripts in one single place, and then you can actually put it over there. You have again two options. You can write either a Groovy script. Groovy is again a very easy to learn language which actually define this pipeline, and then you can use the pipeline syntax to understand and to work with this Groovy language. This is one option where you can put this script right on the main screen where you have. The other and the more popular way, I would say, is when you actually use a GitHub repository to put your Jenkins file, and then you call it from there. Inside the Jenkins job, all you do is just define where your job is and the job where exactly the Jenkins file is located inside that particular repository. You write code inside the script field to see how the pipeline works. So what happens is this pipeline script where you have the script on the Jenkins page itself, it's more for the testing purpose. You want to test how your pipeline is behaving. Once you have done the testing and once you have the script ready, the easiest and the most popular way is to put that into a GitHub repository. Creating a Jenkins file, as we have seen, or the Jenkins pipeline job is, again, as I said, it's very easy. The first step would be to fill the script field with a sample code. You put a snippet of code over there and you test it. Then code is in the declarative pipeline syntax form. So it's very close to, if you have worked on YAML or JSON, it's very close to that. It's very similar to that rather, where you just declare a bunch of things, what exactly it should be. And it's actually even easier than a JSON code. Once you have put that, you save the changes made to the pipeline job by clicking on the save button at the bottom of the page. Once that is done, and before we run the pipeline, it is important to configure the global tool configuration page in Jenkins. So what we mean is that you need to configure, let's say, Maven, JDK, and any of the tools which your job is going to use. You should have them pre-configured. Otherwise, the chances are that your code or your job is going to fail. So configure the Maven tool inside the global tool configuration to make our pipeline work. Once you have done everything, once you have set up the Jenkins pipeline, this is the page which greets you. This is the main Jenkins project page where it shows in step-by-step format. So each stage, we have a concept of stage in when you create a pipeline. So basically you have a build stage, post-build, pre-build. You can define all these stages as per your requirement. This is something which you can customize. And Jenkins will basically help you visualize the progress of various stages of a pipeline in real time. If you have worked with a pipeline called a build pipeline view, if you have worked on that pipeline, it's very similar to that. It's just even more intuitive to look at. And the stage view page will look something like the following screenshot which you are seeing at your screen at the moment. As you can see here, it tells the expected stage based on the history. Then at the top, it shows the stage name and typically how long it would have taken. And the color code basically indicates if it is green, it is successful. If it is red, it has failed, and so on. And then on extreme left, it will show you what is the number of the build, the pipeline number, how many iterations. So it's very similar to what we do as a build number when we were working with normal jobs. And this down arrow would basically show if this build contains any kind of artifacts. And of course, there would be a timestamp, time and date. It will show when and at what time this job has run on your Jenkins master. So let's take a look at the structure, what exactly we write in the pipeline structure. So the first thing which you define is the node block. A node block is, as you can expect, it is the Jenkins agent wherein stage blocks, directives, and steps should be running. So if you remember, we had the labels defined when we created our distributed Jenkins architecture where we had the master slave architecture and we created build slaves for ourselves. And each build slave, if you remember, we have a label defined for those. So that label you actually mention over here. And then based on that, Jenkins will run the job either on the master or on the node which you have defined. So it defines the node where the stages, directives, or the steps should run. Constituents would mean that multiple stage blocks, directives, or steps. If you mentioned whether it is required or not, yes, it is required. It is a compulsory field where you have to mention. And when it comes to writing, you can mention, let's say you don't want to mention any specific node name here. You want this to be run on any of the nodes. In that case, you can simply mention as any. So that would mean that Jenkins will take it, will run it anywhere, wherever or whichever node is free, it will run. It can even run on master. Next would be stages. So stage is basically individual snippet for each task to be done. So each task would be basically a stage. So you will have a build stage. You will maybe have a clone stage. You will have a testing stage. Let's say post-build steps, maybe sending emails. So each one will actually be a step. So it basically defines a collection of steps and directives. It can contain multiple node blocks. And it is a compulsory field, so you need to have stages when you're writing the pipeline. And stage block is basically a bundle of closely related steps and directives that have a common objective. And you can then define parameters as well if needed, and if required, you can just go ahead and do that. And the name of the stage is actually one of the compulsory parameters, which you have to mention. You have to give it a name. And this is mostly user defined. Directives basically are the actual steps, which basically it will tell they are basically to suggest the node block, stage block, and steps by providing them with any of the following. So what you do is you mention options, parameters, environments, triggers, tools. So all these things you mention, and those are the directives or the examples of directives. So it defines basically where the node where the stage should run. And you can define environments, you can define options. It is one of the optional fields. You don't have to compulsorily have it, but most of the CI/CD pipeline will have a directives stage. Then finally, you have steps, which is the fundamental block of a pipeline. Steps is where the actual execution takes place. It could be a batch script or a shell script, or it could be any simple command that's executable. Now, steps have various purposes, such as cloning a repository, building a code, running the tests, uploading artifacts. So any kind of steps which we have been working so far in Jenkins, all those actual steps you define within the steps block. And this is the one which actually tells Jenkins what needs to be done. It will, as I said, it will contain the commands and scripts and all those things which are the actual workhorses of your pipeline. And once again, it is not a compulsory thing, but every CI/CD pipeline will have it. Because without this, though you can have a pipeline, but it would be meaningless. It would be good for nothing. So this is a screenshot of a sample pipeline. It is written in declarative language. And as you can see here, if you see the first step or the first snippet, it is agent any. So it would mean that this job can be run on any of the available nodes. And if the master is available, it can even run on the master. So in declarative pipeline syntax, there is a concept of pipeline block, which defines all the work done throughout the entire pipeline. So if you see here, pipeline, we start here, and then there is curly braces opening here, and it encompasses the whole thing, whatever you write within that pipeline. So that's what it defines. The whole steps, each and everything, all these steps will be within this big pipeline block. Everything will be inside this pipeline. So once you have defined the agents, you can also define, as I said, you can also define the name of the node. So basically the label on which you want to define it, or you can even define none. And now when you say none, basically what we mean is that you are mentioning that, you might have different stages using different slaves. So some you might want to run on master, some you might not want to run on master. So in those situations, you will keep agent as none, and then you will define the individual agents within each stages block. Each stage block will have an agent declarative which will define which agent should be used for that particular step. And once you have defined the agent, you have stages block, and again you have different stages. So each stage will have a meaningful purpose. So if you see here, stage defining by number 2, you have a build stage, and then you define the steps. Then you have test stage, and then you define the steps. Then you have deploy stage, and you define the steps. And at the end, all these things are part of the big pipeline block. So if we get the overview of the pipeline syntax, so you execute this pipeline or any of its stages or any available agent. That's what we mean by the first block called pipeline. Then you define the build stage. You will have some steps related to the build stage. So maybe it can be a Maven build or an Ant build. You can define all those things here. Then next would be test stage. Again, pertaining to test stage, you will have some test related things. So maybe, let's say Maven test you can define, or maybe some JUnit testing or some Selenium testing steps, you can define it over here. Once that is done, you create a deploy stage or define a deploy stage, and then you perform some deploy related things. For example, you want to upload or you want to deploy some Tomcat based application on the Tomcat servers. So all those things you can actually put within the deploy stage, and then you can write the corresponding commands or scripts, you can call them, and then it will do the needful. So even in the scripted pipeline, you have the node blocks does core work for the entire pipeline. That's the major difference. In case of declarative, you have the pipeline block, but in case of scripted pipeline, you have the node block, which does most of the work for you. So that's the kind of umbrella block which contains everything inside it. And adding the pipeline's work inside a node block, this basically does two things. You schedules the steps contained within the block to run when an executor is free on a node. So basically that will be defining which node it is going to go based on the label. And then it creates a workspace where work can be done on files checked out from source. So it will make use of the Jenkins workspace within var-lib Jenkins. So all this while we have spoken about the actual pipeline script, the scripted view and the declarative view. But in order to work with Jenkins as pipeline or pipeline as code, one very important component is to have the pipeline plugin. Now, pipeline plugin is again as easy as to install as anything else. You can actually go ahead and in the manage Jenkins and then manage plugin page, and then you can just install the pipeline plugin, and then you get all the required steps. And then when you create a new job, you have this option of creating a pipeline instead of a job. Now we have this option called pipeline syntax. So we'll take a look at this one. Basically you can easily create pipeline so you don't understand how exactly you want to write. So Jenkins gives you this option of snippet generator. It will help you learn the pipeline script code, which can be used to define various steps. So what you do is you basically on the steps drop down, you choose a step, what exactly you want to do. So this is very similar to what you do on the GUI, right? So it gives you the exact simulation. And once you have done that, it will actually give you the actual code. If you see here at the top, you give the sample step, you put the label. Once you click on this generate pipeline script, it will give you the actual code block which you need to write inside your pipeline as code or inside your Jenkins file. So this is a very important tool which Jenkins provides you with in order to understand, especially when you started working with pipeline as code concept, right? It helps you a lot initially. So To generate a code for the node block, you just need to, on the pipeline syntax page, under this step section, you choose the node, you mention the node, and then in the label field, you add a string called master. So this is basically because I want to run on the master. If you want to run somewhere else, let's say some other label you want to use, you will put the label accordingly. And once you click on generate pipeline script, it will give you what script you need to have inside your pipeline script. So this is how you do it. Once again, you have seen, so the previous example, it was shown for to allocate the node for a specific job to be built. In this example, as we have seen, we have created some stage. We can give it any name. So name would be given here. And that's how you mention it. So you mention the stage within round brackets, you mention preparation under single quotes, and then you write the actual code or actual command to execute that particular stage. So another example, you choose a Git. So basically this will be used when you want to download the source code from GitHub. So the moment you choose Git and you give the repository URL, the moment you do that, it will actually give you the option how you can actually, once you click on generate pipeline script, it will give you the code which you can put inside the Jenkins file. Now, creating a pipeline using the pipeline plugin. So you switch to the pipeline job configuration page. Then you navigate to the pipeline section and paste the pipeline code inside the script field. And then you click the save button at the bottom of the page. That's how easy and simple it is to work with. So all this while we were talking about a simple Jenkins pipeline, a CI/CD pipeline having maybe 10, 20, 5, 10, whatever number of steps. Jenkins also provides you an option of multi-branch pipeline. So multi-branch pipeline basically allows to automatically create a pipeline for each branch on the source control repository. So let's say you have 5 different branches for your source code. So each one can have a different branch. And at the end, depending on which one has been committed or which one has been saved last, based on that, that particular branch will be deployed. So you can set up all these things. And the advantage of a multi-branch pipeline is that the execution happens in parallel. So once again, multi-branch pipeline works using a Jenkins file, and Jenkins file is nothing but a pipeline script that defines the CI pipeline. The only difference would be the Jenkins file will remain the same. However, it will be triggered every time with a different branch. And you also have an option of controlling if you want to, let's say, change a couple of things based on which branch you are working. Let's say you are using dev branch and prod branch. And if anything happens to dev branch, you want to deploy onto dev machines. And if anything, any commit or any push happens to the prod branch, you want to deploy to the prod machines. So you have an option of setting up environment variables, or you can define it in a different way, what exactly needs to be done, and then it will take care of it accordingly. So Jenkins is smart enough to understand those changes and then work on it. Jenkins file basically is stored along with the source code inside a version control repository. So along with the code which you have worked, you save the Jenkins file as well, so that Jenkins file understands where to pick the code from. So if we have the pictorial representation, this is how it is going to look like. So at the top, you have a single source control repository with multiple branches. In this case, I have feature branch 1, integration branch, and feature branch 2. And the Jenkins file and the source code, we have different ones. Actually, Jenkins file is the same, but source code is different. And you have pipeline for feature branch 1, pipeline for feature branch, pipeline for feature branch 2. And at the end, if you see, the integration test is same for all of them. However, the build and the unit test, these are different depending on which branch you are working on. So the multi-branch pipeline is designed to trigger a build whenever there is a new code change on any of the branches on the GitHub repository. So as we have spoken, what happens is the moment you push a change on, let's say, branch 1 or branch 2, based on that, it will initiate the build and subsequent unit testing. And if everything passes, it will go ahead with the integration tests. And finally, if everything goes well, it will go ahead with the deployment if you have defined that inside your Jenkins job. So when you're working with GitHub, one of the important steps is to add the GitHub credentials inside Jenkins. Now we have already seen this initially when we were working with our repository. When we created the initial repositories we created, when you need to add credentials, Jenkins gives you multiple options. You can use username and password, you can use username with SSH key, and other options. So you have 5 or 6 different options how you want to work with. So you just need to go to global credentials page, click on add credentials link, and configure all the fields. So as you have the options, you can give the unique ID to the credentials, you can add some meaningful description, Of course, you will give the username and password, or any kind of SSH file or anything else if you have. Let's say you are using SSH public-private key pair mechanism. So anything, Jenkins supports most of these mechanisms which you work on a daily basis. Once that is done, you need to configure Jenkins to talk to GitHub. So you come to configure system from Jenkins dashboard. Under the GitHub section, you just need to click on add GitHub server button and choose GitHub. And once you do that, it will ask you basically the API URL. It will ask for the URL. You just need to give api.github.com. That's the default value. That will work in most of the cases if you're working on GitHub public account or basically public GitHub repository. If you're using GitHub Enterprise, which is kind of on-prem version of GitHub, then you need to specify the specific API endpoints which you have used for that. And one important thing, you need to make sure that manage hooks option is checked. Once that is done, you need to click on advanced. Under the additional field, you need to click on manage additional GitHub sections and choose convert login and password to token from the available list. So again, this will further disclose new windows for you and new fields for you. Select the from credentials options and choose GitHub credentials, create the token, and this will generate a new personal access token on GitHub account. Once that is done, you just save at the bottom, clicking by clicking on save button. And in order to view the personal access token, you just need to go to GitHub account and navigate to settings, developer settings, and personal access tokens. This is the place where you have all the access tokens saved for your GitHub account. And under the configure system of manage Jenkins, you need to choose the newly generated credentials of the kind secret text. And once that is done, you just need to click on the test connection button to test the connection between Jenkins and GitHub. Now, all these things are required only if you're using a GitHub account which is not a public account, which uses a user ID and password mechanism to convert. If you're using a public repository, then you don't need to do all this. You just need to mention the URL and rest all will be taken care. It's only required when you have an authentication in place for GitHub repositories. Adding Jenkins file, it's just like adding a new Jenkins file for your repository. So it's as easy as creating a new file inside your root folder. So again, you can just, if you are connected from your local machine, you just need to create a Jenkins file and then make sure you just push it to your GitHub repository. Otherwise, you can directly create a Jenkins file on the GitHub GUI as well by clicking on create new file, and then you give the file name as Jenkins file. It will be an empty file initially, and then you can start writing your code into it. Once you have saved the changes, once you have, let's say, created some change, you just need to click on commit new file. Of course, you need to give a meaningful commit message. Typically, some commit message will be pre-filled inside the box. If you're fine with that, you can just click on commit new file. If you don't want to make some changes, if you want to make it more unique, you are welcome to do those changes. And once that is done, you can just go ahead and click on commit new file. Be careful with which branch you are committing. Typically, it will show the branch which you are on at the moment. If you want to save directly to the master branch, you can just check this radio button, commit directly to the master branch. This will basically show the branch which you are currently on. But let's say you want to save this file inside a new branch. You want to basically create a new branch as well and then save this file. So in that case, you choose the second radio button and give some name to this new branch and then click on commit new file. So once you have done that, it is very easy to run. Once again, you go to Jenkins dashboard, navigate to multi-branch pipeline, and you need to, on the Jenkins multi-branch pipeline page, you need to click on the scan repository now link. This scans the repository for branches with Jenkins file and immediately runs a pipeline for all the branches that has got a Jenkins file as shown in the following screenshot. So basically, this gives you the ability to run multiple scans or multiple builds simultaneously. And GitHub webhooks, they are configured to trigger a pipeline automatically whenever there is a push or a new branch on your GitHub repository is there. And a Jenkins file should also be present on the respective branch to tell Jenkins what it needs to do when it finds a change in the repository. So that's a very important step. Each branch, so you need to make sure that each branch has got an associated Jenkins file. What you can do is you can actually put the same Jenkins file for all the branches if that serves your purpose. Or if you want to make some changes, then you first copy the Jenkins file to all the branches and then make the appropriate changes as per the individual branch. All right, so let's take a look at how do we work with Jenkins pipeline and how do we create a Jenkins file and a couple of steps how to work with Jenkins or Jenkins pipeline as code. So I click on new item. This is the Jenkins server we have been working so far with. So I click on, let's say, my pipeline, and instead of freestyle project, which we have been using so far, I need to go ahead and use a pipeline. Once that is done, I click on OK. If I want, I can put some description, or I can leave it as it is. I don't want to go into the details of these things. We have already seen all of them, what exactly they are, build triggers and all these things. So let's directly move to the interesting part, which is this pipeline section. And in this, if I click on this, it gives me two options, pipeline script and pipeline script from SCM. So if I choose the first option, as you can see here, it gives me an option to give some code inside the pipeline. I can put it directly here. If I, let's say, choose pipeline script from SCM, it will actually ask me where exactly my Jenkins file is located. Let's say if I choose Git, it will actually give me an option of giving the repository URL. So let's try the first one, and then we will go ahead and try the second option as well. So writing this script, it's extremely easy. What I need to do is simply, I start with the pipeline block. I need to mention which will be the agent. This is a compulsory field, so I put as any. And once that is done, I need to put the stages. And again, this will contain multiple stages. So let's say I want to give a stage called build, and within build, this is the pipeline block. This is the build block basically, where I want to write some steps. And as of now, let's start with a dummy step. So I'll just let's create one more step. So I'll just copy this whole thing, paste it. Let's give it some name. So of course I can't have the same name for the next step as well, or the next stage as well. Let's say I give it package. I click on save, and once everything is done, I just need to click on build now. So as you can see here, the build has been run successfully. If I go here, it tells me that it is running inside the Jenkins workspace. As you can see here, varlib Jenkins workspace, my pipeline, the name of the project, the default behavior, how Jenkins work. And then it starts with the stage build, and then it is building a Maven project. So this is the message which I echoed. And then the package stage, where packaging the Maven project. So these are the two stages I had mentioned. So these, both of them have been set up. And not only that, if you go to my pipeline main page, it will actually show you in a GUI, nice, easy looking GUI, that how many stages it has got, and total how much time it took, and whether it was a successful or a failure. And if you hover around, you can actually check the logs as well. So this is the log for build stage. And similarly, if I close this, if I hover around and click on logs, this is the log for package stage, or the package step. So this is the first way. Now what we will do, we'll make some small changes, and let's go to configure, and I will copy the whole thing. And this time I'm going to convert this into pipeline script from SCM. I will choose Git as my source code repository. And what I'm going to do is, I will first go to my own repository. And this is the repository which I'm going to use. And as of now, there is no Jenkins file here. So what I can do is, I can click on create new file and just paste the content here. So far looks good. Of course, I need to write this file or give the name as Jenkins file one word with J in uppercase, and come down. As you can see here, it has already auto-populated the commit new file message, create Jenkins file. I'm fine with the message. So let's just click on commit new file. So now we have a Jenkins file for this project. What I need to do is, I just need to go ahead and copy this repository location and just paste it over here. And as usual, once I hit tab, if the repository is correct, if the location is reachable by Jenkins, that red message will go away. Of course, just like any other time, this is the location where you want to mention which branch is going to be built. So we are fine with the master branch. That's the only one we have at the moment. We'll proceed. The script path is important. So it will always be Jenkins file, that's for sure. What is different here is, you need to make sure if your Jenkins file is inside your root folder or root directory of the project or not. Let's say if it is inside some folder, some directory. Let's say if it is not here, it is inside, let's say, project folder. So accordingly, you need to mention something like this, project/Jenkins file. Now this is something very similar to when we were working with Maven. We need to mention the pom.xml location, right? And if it is in some subdirectory, we have to mention that as well. we need to mention the exact path from the root. So that is how you work with Jenkins file as well. In our case, it is inside root, it is in the root directory. So we don't need to mention anything additional. Just the name is good enough here. So let's save it out and let's see how it works. I hope everything is fine so far. If I click on build now, so looks like there is some error here. And it tells me that workflow script 17 expecting ending curly brace. So probably that is where we have missed. So let's go back. So looks like we have missed one curly brace at the end. So just let's do an edit to the file and let's see if that helps. I go back, click on build now. All right, so this time it was successful. And as you can see here that it has run both these stages again without any problem. And if I go back to my home page, I can see it was a successful run. It took about 5 seconds. Build stage took about 56 milliseconds and package 58 milliseconds. Only thing which took more time was the checkout SCM page. So going to the GitHub repository and fetching the source code management and fetching the repository, that's what took longest time, about 5 seconds. Right, so now would be the time to write something meaningful. So again, the good thing, this is one of the best things about when you're working with the SCM mode, that you don't have to make any changes to your Jenkins job. Now we are done with the Jenkins job configuration. So we can just come out of it. Whatever changes we need to do, we actually have to do inside the Jenkins file. And that way we are able to version it as well. Every time you do a commit, you're basically creating a snapshot of this file. So what we will do is let's make some more edits, and this time we will put some actual steps here. So what we will do, in fact, let me show you the repository first. So this is you have a pom.xml file and it has got some Maven commands over here. So we can treat this as, though we don't have any actual Java code here, but we can treat this as a Java page and Java code having a pom.xml file. So this will be a Maven build. So if I go to my Jenkins file and if I go to edit, now what I want to do is I want to put some actual steps in the build. So typically what I want to do is I want to do a Maven build here. So again, Jenkins gives me a nice and easy way to understand. If I click on pipeline syntax, it actually gives me this option. This we have seen in the slideshow already. So I want to understand how to work with build steps. So one example would be, if you see here, I have this Git. Let's say I want to understand how to work with Git repository. So I put Git and I put the repository URL as well. So if I come back, let's say I just copy this whole thing and click. Now notice one thing, that this is exactly the same when you configure a job in Jenkins. So this is the exact same things which gives you. And once it is done, what I need to do, if I click on generate pipeline script, it gives me the actual command which I need to run. And this I can put in my Jenkins file. Let's take another example. So let's say I want to publish my XUnit test results report. Report type, let's say JUnit. Pattern, let's say MITRE. If I do this, as you can see here, it gives me what exactly I need to put. I can just copy paste this whole thing and put it in my Jenkins file. Not only that, if let's say that is not sufficient for you, you can just click on this online documentation. This will take you to the pipeline page, the pipeline homepage, and you can get all the information about what exactly and how exactly you can work with the Jenkins pipeline. So coming back to our pipeline, and what I need is, now I was actually looking for Maven. So I have this ant. Let's see if I have, actually I'm looking for Maven build options. All right, so we'll check it out. Good thing is that I already know what exactly needs to be put if it is Maven, and actually you can check inside the documentation if you're not able to find it here. But what I need to do is basically I want to go back to my Jenkins file and click on edit. And what I need to do is I can keep this line, building a Maven project. And in the next line, I can add something called sh. So this basically indicates that this is a command which is supposed to be run on the Linux terminal. And then I can give the exact command. So let's say I want to give mvn compile. For package, let's change this to test. You can just keep it as testing. Don't need to put all these. And again, I can put something like Maven test. So that should be good enough. If I just do a save now, updated Jenkins file. And once that is done, I just need to go back to my Jenkins page and click on build now once again. So as you can see in the console, it has started and it has failed as well. So let's take a look. Alright, so as you can see here, till here it was fine. There is no problem till the cloning of the repository. It fails when it is running mvn compile command, and what I'm getting is error message as mvn command not found. I understand what exactly is wrong here. So what we need to do is, what we have done so far, we have mentioned the agent, we have mentioned the stages, but we have not mentioned the tools which are going to be used for this Jenkins build. So what I need to do, I need to add additional block here, something known as tools block. I need to mention first thing is Maven and second thing is JDK. As you know, these are the two things which are required. However, I need to give the exact name of my Maven, what I have configured on my Jenkins. So I'll go back to my Jenkins instance. I need to go to Jenkins main page, click on Manage Jenkins. And if I go to Global Tool Configuration, this is where I have all these Maven, JDK, Git, and all these things configured. So if I click on Maven installation, it gives me the name. As you can see here, I have Maven 3 and I have local Maven. So let's say I want to use local Maven. So I'll just copy this whole thing and I will put it here, Maven as a name within single quotes. Similarly for JDK, I will come back, click on JDK. This is the name I have used. So I just copy it. I don't need to make any changes here. So I save and exit. And JDK again, I just need to mention that the name of the JDK configuration which we have done within quotes. Alright, so looks good so far. Let's see if it removes or it gets rid of the error message or not. So I commit the changes. I have my file ready now. I go back to Manage Jenkins, Jenkins homepage, and my pipeline is the one which I was working with, and click on Build Now. So let's take a look at the console output, what exactly it gives us. So this is a step which failed the last time, but this time looks like it has succeeded. mvn compile is actually triggering some new jobs, as you can see here. And then it has run some shell script Maven test as well. So as you can see here, it is performing all these things what it is supposed to do. And at the end, it tells me end of pipeline and finished as success. If I come back to the main page view, as you can see here, the last one is a successful run. And if I click on any of them, I can see the actual logs for that particular stage. So this is for, and one more thing, as you can see here, by automatically, I have not done this. Actually, Jenkins has added this stage called tool install. So this is a dedicated block it was, right? So for this, Jenkins has added another stage, and this refers, or this corresponds to the step where Jenkins maps your Maven and JDK installations. So if you see here, fetches the environment variable for tool, and this time it took 47 seconds. The tool installation is local Maven and JDK is JDK 1.9, just like what we have mentioned. Then we have the build stage. If I check the logs, it tells me all these logs for that particular stage. Similarly for test stage, I have the logs again. And it also tells me at each and every step how much time it has taken. So this was a couple of milliseconds, then 9 seconds, and then 10 seconds respectively. This is it. And then let's say what I want to do is after each and every stage. So let's just add and see one more example here. What I want to do is I want to make sure that, after each run, my workspace is clean. So if you see here, there is one option called clean WS, delete workspace when build is done. So if I click over here and if I click on generate pipeline script, I can just go ahead and copy this whole thing and I can put that in my Jenkins file here. So what I will do is I can actually put it here as well. However, I will go ahead and I'll create another stage for it. Let me first copy this whole thing. So this is to create another stage. In fact, I need to make sure that the stage name is different. Cleanup, I can put it as. And then as a command, I just need to mention this one. All right, so once again, just click on commit changes. Come back to the main Jenkins page, go to my pipeline. As you can see here, as of now, I have a build stage and a test stage is the last one. So if I run it again, this time it should add one more step called cleanup, which I have just defined. So this time is taking a bit longer. So tool install successful, checkout SCM successful, build was successful. Test also looks like it is going good so far. And as you can see here, it has added one more step called cleanup. And if I hover around it, if I click on logs, it tells me that, let me disable the auto refresh. Yeah. So if I click on the logs, as you can see here, it tells me what exactly has been done in this step. And in fact, I can go ahead and check the same thing in the console output as well. So this was for the Maven compile. This one is for Maven test. And then finally, this is for the cleanup. All right, so that brings us to an end of this demo. Let's go back to our slideshow. So this is what we have done so far, and you can refer to the demo document provided in the LMS, and you can perform the same steps to understand how exactly pipeline works. All right, so in this module, we have learned about the pipeline as code, and we spoke about pipeline plugin, and then we saw how we can automate Jenkins pipeline with the help of pipeline as code. So before we end this module, I just want to make sure that you have if you want to understand more about Jenkins and do more practice, this is one place which I would highly recommend all of you, which we have just seen already. You can actually come to this page called jenkins.io/doc. This is the official documentation for Jenkins. It gives you very good information about Jenkins. And if you're interested in taking the Jenkins certification exam, then you can actually go ahead and check out this page, which is Certified Jenkins Engineer. CloudBees is the company which controls it. You can download this study guide, which will talk about the details, what exactly you need to understand in order to give this exam. And it has got some really good information. I would highly recommend, even if you don't want to take the exam, from general understanding perspective, you should read this guide and understand how much you have learned about Jenkins. And of course, this is the official documentation. I would again recommend you to go through this tutorial section, especially where you have a number of small projects to complete, which will give you a very good idea on how to work with Jenkins under different circumstances. All right, so with that, we come to an end of this module and end of this course. Have a great learning ahead, and thank you for watching.